Most luxury watch lists tell you what something costs. This one tells you what you are actually buying when you pay it. Because Omega's 2026 catalog is not what most people think it is. It is not the brand you choose when you cannot get a Rolex. Omega is the brand that beat every other watch manufacturer on Earth in a NASA test in 1965, when Rolex, Longines, Breitling, and several others submitted their best watches only to watch them fail. And now, we'll go through 14 Omega watches and their prices so you can make your choice. We start at the most accessible end of the catalog and build toward the most serious. Starting at number 14, the watch most people overlook. Number 14, Omega DeVille Prestige, $2,300 to $19,000. The DeVille Prestige is where Omega's dress watch identity lives at its most accessible. Thin case, clean dial, quartz and mechanical variants, depending on the reference. The name comes from the DeVille line that Omega first introduced in 1960 as a dressier extension of the Seamaster, and it has always been part of the catalog for people who want the Omega name and Swiss craftsmanship without the tool watch bulk. At a starting price of $2,300 on the secondary market, this is genuinely one of the lowest entry points into a brand with a METAS-certified movement program, a NASA qualification history, and 6 decades of continuous manufacture. The DeVille Prestige does not carry the drama of the Speedmaster or the depth-rated credentials of the Seamaster. What it carries is the Omega name on a watch appropriate for every formal context, built to standards most competitors at this price point cannot meet. The comparison that matters here is not to other Omega watches, but to what else exists at $2,300 to $19,000. Swiss quartz watches that wear out in 5 years. Entry-level automatic pieces from brands that have never had a watch qualify for a space program. The DeVille Prestige is not the most exciting watch in this price range. It is the most credentialed one. The honest verdict: this is not the Omega you buy if you have strong opinions about horology. It is the Omega you buy if you want to own a well-made Swiss dress watch without spending as much as the Constellation costs. For that specific purpose, nothing in the catalog serves it better. One step up, and the catalog starts to reveal what Omega genuinely understands better than almost anyone else: the anti-magnetic tool watch. Number 13, Omega Railmaster, $5,800 to $6,800. The Railmaster was introduced in 1957 as part of a trio alongside the Seamaster 300 and the first Speedmaster. It is Omega's answer to the question of what professional-grade tool watches should look like for 3 different kinds of work. The Submariner was designed for divers, the Speedmaster for racers, and, eventually, astronauts. The Railmaster was designed for scientists and engineers working in environments with intense magnetic fields, where standard lever escapements would be pulled out of beat and rendered useless. The modern Railmaster carries that legacy forward with an antimagnetic architecture that resists fields up to 15,000 Gauss. This is enough to withstand proximity to MRI machines, railway switching equipment, and the kind of industrial machinery most people never encounter, but some people spend their careers around. It is a watch that has an actual functional reason to exist beyond aesthetics. On the wrist, it is quietly distinctive. The dial is clean to the point of austerity. No date window, in most configurations. No complicated bezel. The hour markers are clear and legible, the hands broad and practical. The whole design communicates the same thing the original 1957 watch communicated. This was built to work, not to be looked at. At $5,800 to $6,800, it is one of the most underrated pieces in the catalog. The Railmaster does not have the cultural cachet of the Seamaster 300M or the mythology of the Speedmaster. It has something rarer in the modern watch market. A genuine engineering story that most buyers never take the time to find. The person wearing a Railmaster in 2026 is almost always the person who specifically looked for it, not the person who defaulted to it. That demographic tends to keep their watches longer and care more about what is inside the case. Secondary market pricing on the Railmaster typically runs 10 to 20% below retail, making it one of the more accessible META-certified options in the entire Swiss watch market at this price level. For the buyer who wants something with real anti-magnetic credentials and a design that has not been optimized for Instagram legibility, this is the answer. Number 12 takes us into one of Omega's most versatile collections, the watch that dresses up as well as it dresses down. Number 12. Omega Seamaster Aquaterra, $5,500 to $8,000. The Aquaterra is the Seamaster for people who do not actually dive. And that sentence, which sounds like a criticism, is in fact a description of what makes it one of the smartest buys in the entire Omega lineup. Most of the people who own Seamaster Diver 300M watches never take them below the surface of a hotel pool. The diver's credentials: 300 meters of water resistance, helium escape valve, ceramic bezel, are genuine and impressive, but they are irrelevant to the life most wearers actually live. The Aquaterra acknowledges this honestly. It retains 150 meters of water resistance. This is enough for every realistic water-related situation outside of professional saturation diving, drops the tool watch bezel, and delivers a dial with a horizontal line pattern inspired by the teak decking of a yacht. The result is a watch that reads equally well with a suit, with a blazer and jeans, or with weekend clothes. The current generation, powered by the coaxial master chronometer caliber 8900, is certified to META standards. This means it has been tested for magnetic resistance up to 15,000 Gauss and for accuracy within 0 to 5 seconds per day. This is not a marketing claim. It is a third-party certification from the Swiss Federal Institute of Metrology, the same institution that certifies precision instruments for scientific applications. In the $5,500 to $8,000 range, no competitor offers that level of independently verified performance. At this price, you are also getting a watch that works as a daily wearer without apology. The Aquaterra's case proportions, available in 38mm and 41mm, suit contexts where a 44mm sport watch would look out of place. It is the Omega you could wear to a job interview in the morning and to a weekend hike in the afternoon, and have it read correctly in both situations. That versatility is genuinely rare at this price, and most competitors charge significantly more for it. From a dress sport hybrid to something with a real military heritage. Number 11. Omega Seamaster 300 Heritage, $7,600 to $66,000. The Seamaster 300 Heritage is what happens when a brand with genuine history chooses to honor it rather than sell it. The original 1,957. Seamaster 300 was Omega's professional dive watch, a tool built for military divers and commercial underwater operators at a time when that market was expanding rapidly and watch manufacturers were competing to supply it. The lollipop seconds hand, the sword hands, the oversized luminous indices. These were not aesthetic choices. They were legibility solutions for divers working in low visibility conditions at depth, where a standard dial might be impossible to read and a timing error could be lethal. The modern Heritage reissue keeps it all. The dial reads almost exactly as the original did, the same spatial relationship between the indices, the same hand design, the same attention to the logic that the tool watch aesthetic is not decorative, but functional. What has changed is the movement inside. The master chronometer caliber, 8,806, brings the anti-magnetic architecture and META certification that Omega has been rolling out across the catalog since 2015. The result is a watch that looks like it was made in 1957 and performs like something made now. For the buyer who wants a dive watch with an aesthetic not optimized for 2026 social media legibility, the Seamaster 300 Heritage is one of the most satisfying objects in the current catalog. At $7,600 to $66,000, it is priced into the same territory as the Diver 300M. The choice between them is a matter of what you value: the modern evolution of the dive watch formula, or the original one. Both arguments have merit, but the Heritage makes a case that the original was already close to right. and that improving on the mechanical architecture inside while leaving the exterior largely alone is a more honest form of progress than redesigning the watch from scratch every decade. This next watch needs almost no introduction, but most people only know half of what makes it interesting. Number 10. Omega Seamaster Diver 300 M $5,900 to $7,000. The Seamaster Diver 300M became famous in 1995 when Pierce Brosnan wore it as James Bond in GoldenEye. That association, which Omega has maintained across every Bond film since, now spanning 30 years and 6 actors, is the most durable celebrity endorsement in the history of the luxury watch industry. Rolex had Bond first. Omega took him and kept him for 3 decades. But the Bond connection, while responsible for the watch's cultural saturation, somewhat obscures what makes the Diver 300M genuinely excellent as an object. The current generation, redesigned in 2018 and refined since then, is built around a wave-patterned ceramic dial that changes character dramatically in different lighting conditions. It is deep and flat in shade, almost luminescent in direct sunlight. The ceramic bezel is unidirectional and scratch-resistant to a degree that makes the aluminum alternatives seem provisional. The movement is the master chronometer caliber 8,800, certified to the METAS standard, anti-magnetic to 15,000 Gauss, with a 5-hour power reserve. At $5,900 to $7,000, with the gray market typically sitting 15 to 25% below retail, meaning you can frequently find these watches for $4,000 to $5,000 in excellent pre-owned condition. This is one of the most accessible METAS-certified watches in the market. For the price of a steel Rolex Submariner, you can own a watch that has independently verified accuracy standards that the Submariner does not carry. The Submariner starts at over $10,000 at retail in 2026. You can buy a current generation Diver 300M new for around $5,800. That comparison matters. The Submariner is an excellent watch. The Diver 300M is a different argument about what an excellent watch should prove about itself. Whether you need the proof depends on what kind of buyer you are, but it is available. And at this price point, nothing else is offering it, going up in the catalog now. This next Omega makes a very specific statement about who you are. Number 9. Omega Constellation Globemaster, $8,500 to $52,400. The Globemaster is the watch that Omega makes for people who find the Seamaster too sporty and the DeVille too understated. It sits in the dress watch category but carries technical credentials most dress watches do not bother with: METAS Master Chronometer certification, anti-magnetic architecture, and mechanical build quality that puts it in a different conversation from the Constellation models that preceded it. The signature detail is the pie pan dial, a raised, angled outer chapter ring borrowed from the observatory constellations of the 50s and 60s that Omega entered in precision timekeeping competitions. Those watches won. The Neuchâtel Observatory Chronometer Trials were the most prestigious accuracy competitions in watchmaking during the post-war decades. Manufacturers submitted their best movements, and the results were published. Omega won repeatedly. The championship crosshairs engraved on the caseback of every Globemaster are not decorative. They reference an actual competitive record in horological precision that no other brand's dress watch at this price point can claim. The specific irony of the Globemaster's market position is that it is more technically interesting than it looks. Most people pass it by in favor of the Speedmaster or the Seamaster because those watches announce themselves immediately. The Globemaster does not announce itself. It rewards people who look closely, notice the dial architecture, ask about the caseback, and receive an answer that goes back to competitions held before most of today's buyers were born. At $7,000 to $12,500, the Globemaster occupies a position in the catalog that rewards people who understand what they are looking at. Most people do not, but the ones who do tend to keep these watches for a very long time. This next watch is the most extreme in the Omega catalog, and the one that exists entirely for a specific kind of person. Number 8. Omega Seamaster Ploprof 1200 $12,600 to $16,100. The Ploprof is Omega's acknowledgement that most watches pretend to be dive watches, and one watch actually is one. The original Plongeur Professionnel, Ploprof for short, was introduced in 1970 for saturation divers. It is for commercial and military underwater operators who lived in pressurized environments for days or weeks at a time and needed timekeeping equipment that would not fail at the depths, pressures, and conditions where their work. The case was enormous, asymmetrical, and unlike anything Omega had produced before or has produced since. The crown sits on the left side of the case. The push piece that unlocks the bezel rotation requires a separate action to operate, preventing accidental adjustment at depth. The modern 1200M retains all of this. The case measures 55 mm by 48 mm, a watch that wears like a piece of equipment because it is a piece of equipment. The water resistance is rated to 1,200 meters. The movement is the master chronometer caliber 8912, coaxial, METAS certified. The shark mesh bracelet is a direct reference to the original, $12,600 to $16,100. Buys you a watch that fewer than 1% of buyers will ever wear under the conditions it was designed. Bore. The other 99% buy it because it is one of the most uncompromisingly functional objects in the watchmaking world, and there is a specific kind of person who finds that quality more compelling than any amount of prestige engineering. Those people tend to be engineers, or scientists, or people who spend time around industrial or marine equipment and understand from professional experience what it means to build something that will not fail under the conditions that destroy ordinary objects. When they see the Ploprof, they recognize it immediately, not from advertising, but from the logic of the design. Every feature is there for a reason. Nothing is decorative. The watch is, in the strictest sense, honest. Its secondary market position is interesting. The Ploprof trades roughly at retail on pre-owned platforms, sometimes modestly above, because the collector community that cares about it is small and devoted, and not inclined to sell. It is not a watch that generates much casual traffic in watch forums. The people who own one tend to keep it. From the most functional watch in the catalog to the most technically ambitious chronograph, let's move on to number 7. Number 7. Omega Speedmaster Dark Side of the Moon. $15,700 to $16,400. The dark side of the moon is what happens when Omega decides the Speedmaster's design language can support materials that the original watch never considered. The case is full black zirconium oxide ceramic. It is not a ceramic bezel over a steel case, but a ceramic case from lug to lug. The result weighs considerably less than a steel equivalent, while being harder than the steel it replaces. Essentially impossible to scratch under normal wearing conditions, and a color that does not fade because it is not a coating. It is the material itself. At $15,700 to $16,400, the dark side occupies the upper register of Omega's accessible stainless steel range and announces itself differently than any other Speedmaster in the catalog. It does not look like a watch that is trying to reference history. It looks like a watch that is trying to say something about what the Speedmaster can be when the design language is used as a foundation rather than a constraint. The movement inside is the caliber 1869, the same manual wind architecture that powers the Moonwatch Professional, reconfigured for the ceramic case architecture. For someone who wants a Speedmaster that reads as modern rather than heritage, this is the sharpest argument in the collection. Number 6 is the Speedmaster that most people are familiar with, and the one with the most documented history of any watch currently in production. So, let's talk about it. Number 6. Omega Speedmaster 57, $10,300 to $25,000. The Speedmaster 57 is the watch Omega makes for people who looked at the Moonwatch and wanted something that looked more like where it started. The original 1957 Speedmaster, reference CK2915, had a broader case, a different lug design, and a dial that read differently than the narrower case of the references that went to space. It was a racing chronograph first. The moon connection came later. The modern 57 references that original proportions deliberately. The case is broader. The pushers are different. The dial typography is closer to the 1957 original than the Moonwatch's more refined evolution. The movement is the master chronometer caliber, 9908, automatic, METIS certified, with a 60-hour power reserve. That last point deserves emphasis. The Moonwatch Professional is manual wind. You wind it daily. The 57 is automatic. It winds itself. For buyers who want the Speedmaster design language and the Speedmaster history without the manual wind maintenance ritual, the 57 is the answer the catalog provides. At $10,300 to $25,000, it sits in similar territory to the Moonwatch and asks you to decide which version of the story you want to wear. From the 57 to number 5, the watch that actually went to the moon. Before we move on to the next part, let me tell you this. Most people don't realize this, but buying a watch the wrong way can cost you thousands, and you won't even notice it until it's too late. You walk into a store or browse online, and everything looks the same, but behind the scenes, there's a system. Prices aren't always fair, availability is controlled, and one bad decision can leave you overpaying for something that doesn't even hold its value. That's why I created a complete free insider guide to buying watches. Inside, you'll find the best watches to buy, the watches to avoid, and how to choose a watch that actually fits your style and budget long term. The goal is simple. I'll help you stop guessing and start buying smart. You'll find the free guide in the pinned comment and description. Now, let's move on to the next part. Number 5. Omega Speedmaster Professional Moonwatch, $6,000 to $15,000. On the 20th of July, 1969, Buzz Aldrin stepped onto the lunar surface wearing a Rolex Submariner. That sentence is false. He was wearing an Omega Speedmaster Professional. His Rolex had been left on the command module because NASA did not want the module's backup timer to be at risk. It is a detail most people do not know, and it changes the story considerably. The Speedmaster Professional is the only watch in history to be qualified by NASA for all manned space missions and extravehicular activity. That qualification, earned in 1965 after Omega beat out several competitors in tests of extreme temperature, vibration, shock, and pressure, was not a marketing arrangement. It was a procurement decision. The government of the United States chose this watch because it was the one that survived. The tests themselves are worth knowing. Omega submitted the Speedmaster alongside watches from Rolex, Longines, Breitling, and others. The evaluation involved 11 different tests. Temperature shock from -18 to +93 degrees Celsius, humidity exposure, oxygen atmosphere, pressure differentials, vacuum conditions, vibration at various frequencies, linear acceleration, acoustic noise, and shock resistance. Rolex did not pass all 11. Omega did. That is the reason the Speedmaster went to space and not the Submariner. The current reference, 310.30.42.50, 1.001, retails for approximately $7,400 to $7,800 in the US, with secondary market prices typically lower depending on condition and whether the box and papers are present. It is manual wind, which means you wind it daily. The Hesalite crystal scratches more readily than sapphire. It is 42 millimeters, which is not large by modern standards. None of this is a drawback. The watch is exactly what it has always been. The most documented, most verified, most historically specific, functional instrument in civilian watchmaking. When you buy a Moonwatch, you are not buying a facsimile of something famous. You are buying the actual design that went to the moon. And in 2026, at this price point, nothing else in the history of watchmaking can make that statement. The Moonwatch defined what Omega is. Number 4 defines what Omega is becoming in 2026, and it is the most significant new product in the catalog this year. Number 4, Omega Constellation Observatory 2026, $10,900 plus. The Constellation Observatory Collection debuted in early 2026 as Omega's most technically specific statement since the introduction of the Master Chronometer program in 2015. The collection is built around a precision testing methodology that Omega calls acoustic resonance analysis, a process that uses sound wave technology to measure the vibration frequency of the balance spring with greater accuracy than traditional optical methods, thereby identifying irregularities at a level of detail that previous quality control approaches could not reach. The result is a watch certified to accuracy standards that exceed Meta's requirements, a certification that was already the most demanding third-party accuracy verification in commercial watchmaking. The Observatory Collection is priced at just over $10,900 at retail, placing it at the upper boundary of Omega's steel range and its entry-level precious metal territory. What makes the observatory significant in 2026 is what it signals about the catalog's direction. Omega has been building toward this level of technical specificity since George Daniels' coaxial escapement arrived in 1999. The Observatory Collection is the current culmination of that trajectory, the watch that exists not to reference history, but to advance it. The final three, starting with the limited edition that captures 2026's most significant sporting moment. Number 3. Omega Seamaster Diver 300M Milano Cortina 2026 edition. $11,000 to $12,000. Every 4 years, Omega releases a watch tied to the Olympic Games, a natural relationship given the brand's role as the official timekeeper of every Olympics since 1932. The 2026 Milan Cortina Winter Games edition is the current iteration, and it is more technically interesting than most Olympic limited editions tend to be. The case material is grade 2 titanium, considerably lighter than steel, more resistant to corrosion, and, in Omega's current production quality, finished to a standard that makes titanium feel less industrial and more precious than the material's reputation typically suggests. The ceramic bezel carries the Olympic rings alongside the standard dive watch graduation. The reference is limited, though Omega's Olympic editions have historically been more widely available than the brand's marketing language implies. At approximately $11,000 to $12,000, this sits above standard diver 300M pricing by roughly $3,000 to $4,000. It is a premium that buys you a specific material combination and a timestamp on the dial that will become more historically specific as the years pass. Whether that timestamp appreciates in the secondary market depends on the particular collector community that forms around it, which is not predictable. What is predictable is the underlying watch quality, which is the same master chronometer architecture as every other current generation diver 300M. 2 remaining. Number 2 is the Speedmaster that most people overlook, and that might be the most interesting complication in the catalog. Number 2. Omega Speedmaster Moonphase Chronograph Master Chronometer. $9,000 to $14,000. The Speedmaster Moonphase is the Speedmaster for people who have decided the standard chronograph is not enough. The Moonphase complication, a display that tracks the lunar cycle through a rotating disc visible through an aperture in the dial, is one of watchmaking's oldest and most decorative functions. Most Moonphase watches use it as an ornament. The Speedmaster uses it as part of an argument about what the watch can hold without losing its identity. The caliber 9904, which powers the current Moonphase, achieves lunar cycle accuracy to within 5 minutes over 12.5 years without adjustment, a figure that belongs in the same conversation as considerably more expensive complications from brands that charge far more for the privilege. The chronograph function is coaxial, METAS certified, and built to the same anti-magnetic standards as the rest of the master chronometer lineup. At $9,000 to $14,000, depending on configuration, this is the Speedmaster that rewards people who look closely. It does not shout. The Moonphase aperture is subtle against the broader dial architecture. The watch is most impressive in the moments when someone who knows what they are looking at stops and says something. And number 1, the watch that carries the heaviest history, the clearest purpose, and in 2026, the most complex relationship with its own price. Number 1. Omega Seamaster Planet Ocean 600M, $6,500 to $10,500. The Planet Ocean is the dive watch Omega builds for the person who finds the Diver 300M insufficient. 600 meters of water resistance, double the Diver, with a case architecture that prioritizes protection and legibility above elegance. The coin edge bezel is unidirectional. The Arabic numerals at 3, 6, and 9 are not a design choice. They are a precision reading solution for a watch that was engineered to work in conditions where fine motor control is compromised and time-critical decisions are made in seconds. The exhibition caseback shows the Master Chronometer Caliber 8,000, 900 inches full, a movement that represents the current state of what Omega can do with an in-house architecture. The Planet Ocean is the place in the catalog where the brand stops accommodating daily wear and starts designing for actual underwater work. At $6,500 to $10,500, it is priced below most of what precedes it on this list, not because it is a lesser watch, but because the secondary market for the Planet Ocean has always been more rational than its technical credentials justify. Buyers reaching for a dive watch at this price point often choose the more famous Diver 300M. The Planet Ocean rewards the buyer who did more research. Omega's catalog in 2026 is the most coherent argument in the accessible luxury watch space for technical credibility over brand mythology. The MITOS program, independently verified accuracy, magnetic resistance, and reliability testing that no other brand applies to its full lineup at this price point, is not a marketing framework. It is a measurable standard. You can verify it. You can test against it. The watch either passes or it does not. At every price on this list, from $2,500 for a DeVille Prestige to well beyond the Planet Ocean in limited and precious metal configurations, what Omega offers is a watch that can be interrogated, that can be asked to prove itself, that has a documented answer ready. In a market where most luxury watches sell primarily on legacy and prestige, on the story of what the brand once did, Omega sells on what the watch currently does. The Rolex on your wrist is there because of Bond, because of Everest, because of 6 decades of accumulated cultural meaning. The Omega on your wrist is there because of all of that, and also because when NASA needed a watch that would not fail on the surface of the moon, Omega was the answer the tests produced. That distinction is not a criticism of Rolex. It is a description of what Omega offers that Rolex does not. Not better. Different. The question of which one belongs on your wrist depends entirely on which kind of evidence you find more compelling. The story of what a brand has meant, or the proof of what a movement has passed. In 2026, the prices across this list reflect both kinds of value. 14 watches. 14 different arguments about what an excellent Swiss timepiece should be. None of them makes the same case twice. Does this make you want to get an Omega? Let me know in the comments. Like this video and subscribe.